Pujari Gamarua Din Babana Gamarada Gadagu Nura. Good day, hello. In the traditional language from where I'm from, the Gadigal language of the Eora Nation from Sydney, Australia. I'd like to acknowledge and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and also to acknowledge any of us here in the Vatican City, but also joining us online who are of Indigenous descent. I'm H.Y. William Chan, and I'm an architect, but I'm also a recovering politician. You see, I've spent the past few years in elected office. But if you were to ask my parents, and even my twin brother who's here joining us today, they would have never thought that I would end up in politics. Greta famously said, "How dare you," to elected political leaders. When I was running for office, I asked, "Do you dare? Do you dare to dream for a sustainable future? Do you dare to represent our generation? Do you dare to do this together?" And these were the exact questions I asked myself in terms of why I ended up putting my hand up and saying yes when I was asked by the Lord Mayor of Sydney to join her team as an independent city councillor. And for me, I've ended up being able to work with my community, to be able to bring my community along on this journey, on this vision. And it hasn't always been easy, but has allowed me to use my skill sets as a professional to balance the needs of our community and their voices with those in relation to expert knowledge in terms of that ambition that we're all striving towards. It's allowed me to be responsible for Australia's global city in terms of urban planning, development, heritage, creative and culture, transport, which includes cycling, pedestrianisation, and what we call traffic calming. And that has allowed me to really shift my understanding of politics. In fact, as a younger person, I've always been disillusioned by politics. I used to be that one who would have my earphones in, walking into the polling booth and not wanting to engage with those handing out flyers and trying to spruik their candidates. And suddenly I found myself on the other side, needing to work with my community to show a vision of what Sydney could look like in 2050. And it is in fact, that's how I ended up in urban governance, was during my 20s. After I had finished the local Pathways Fellowship through SDSN Youth. The City of Sydney had in fact asked the community, what would the city look like in 2050? And I'm so glad, Martin, that you had mentioned this. And the City of Sydney went through a citizens' jury process. 50 randomly selected representatives of our community were given the task to make decisions. It was no longer the politicians coming up with this vision of our future city. It was the people. And over 4 months, it was incredibly hard. They actually thought they would never come to consensus. And I had the chance, as one of the expert witnesses to be called, to work with them. And they built credibility. They built community through devolving urban governance and who actually gets a seat at the table. And they came up with a vision of 10 priorities for Sydney that during my term as an elected representative, we adopted. And this group still refers to it, that process, because it brought them together. Despite their differences, they were able to find common ground and agree on a future long-term vision of what our city and our communities could be. And that's what I've taken on in the council chambers, in the actual decision-making table. And when I made decisions at that table with the other councillors and with the Lord Mayor, there was an empty seat next to me. And please don't tell this to anyone because I haven't shared it with the Lord Mayor, but behind the chair of this empty seat, I had put a little label which said, Citizen of 2050. And it was a metaphorical and physical reminder of who I'm making decisions for. A lot of the time as a politician, I would get emails, mainly complaints in fact, every day of things that should have been done yesterday, that things should have been done in the past. Not many of us speaking to mayors around the world, do they get to make decisions for the future? It is tough, it is challenging, it is brutal. But by having that chair there, having a space that could be occupied as a decision maker, it was a reminder of who I was making decisions for. Not for the now, not for today, but for tomorrow, for the citizens of 2050, for those who might not even be born yet. During community consultations, I would allow members of our community and residents action groups to sit in that chair, to also make decisions from that perspective of this empty chair. For us to be reminded that while intergenerational allyship and action is important, making decisions that has the foresight is equally important. And for us to occupy space in decision-making tables like this one we have today, to join together and do what's best for our future communities. So I want to remind you in terms of our responsibility. Do you dare to lead? Do you dare to create that change and be able to serve and represent in our communities for our sustainable and resilient future? But to do so not for yourself and not for this current generation, but to do that for our future generations. And I hope you too can occupy a seat as a future citizen in our future cities and communities.